article of a woman talking about how it was great that that succeeded and that abortion has become legal in Ireland, but how many women it took having to dig up their trauma and keep telling their own stories to get that to happen. And so we didn't want it to be a sort of, this personal trauma session. That makes sense. Yeah, it wasn't. So we're very conscious. So I felt very conscious about having a character, and I had images for that character. I based it very strongly on a kind of person that I had seen who was like a mummy blogger that I watched on the internet, in terms of my physicality and things that I developed. And then all of the stories were like fed in from research and friends.
Oh, great. So can we both back up and have just a tiny discussion about you said it's so different to how you usually work.
Yeah.
Rabble, how you took the decision to kind of have something text-based.
Yeah.
And then also talk about all of the texts that you were encountering, like the blogger and the articles and all the research you're doing, how you then worked that into a rehearsal process. So can you talk about both of those things?
So the issue we had really early was like finding a way in, and it's what you posted in the Facebook post that I had some feedback I'd given to a group in, like, we had the rehearsal process was me and Mary Helen kind of improvising stories to each other, but also trying to do this kind of but also try and answer a sort of world building situation. And we got really stuck in this, like, where are we? And the problem that we had really early on was this idea of like having to go through oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, good. Yeah, so what are you here for? You know, like all of this stuff that just wasted time, didn't get to the crux of what we needed. And it was all, it was just 10 minutes of like introductions wasted. And so we had this we had to find a way to solve all of that, which you see in the structure of the kind of the beeps and the flashes, where to me, that's like these time jumps of these women meeting. But definitely like just trying to when a couple of weeks ago I talked about this idea of the iceberg and how much was like underneath. We had hours of improvisation of, oh, hey, yeah, hey, like, so what are you doing? Yeah. And it all, yeah, we kind of had to wade through it to realize we can't have it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And what did working with those texts then allow you to do?
I think pretty early on I had offered I had come into rehearsal with an offer of like a hippie sort of woman who was into natural birth and had this like real, and it was a breeze for me, and it was Mother Earth, and I really loved the process. It was very empowering. And there was something about it was too stereotypical, but there was something that was kind of the lead in into creating these kind of oppositional characters, and realizing that if we had two very different points of view about birth, and if we could equally weight them. So the issue that you have in this piece is we didn't want a point of view. We didn't want to say natural birth is better. We didn't want to say having a cesarean section is better or bad. The point of the thematic question, or the theme of the piece, is that when women's kind of experiences are so different, we can't legislate against that. Everyone needs to have their own choice and control of their bodies. But I think if you watched either side of it, we also realized this was where, in working on our piece, that Mary Helen and I had to come from sort of different world points of view, but it still only represented two people, which is why we needed to put the young girl in between the sections, because in order to make that theme really clear, we actually just needed like a multitude of experience to explain. We needed the multitude of experience to make the theme clear, that it is different for everybody. Yeah. Which, like, a lot of it seems simple in hindsight, but sweat and tears went into how to make that happen. Yeah.
So I might say a few things about some of what we read for today, because that really that kind of nonpartisan, putting those different perspectives up against one another and also showing the tension between that. I love that kind of repeat of the frame. Well, everybody's experience is different, but mine's more valuable.
Yeah. And I'm not judging, but I am.
But, right. Exactly. And just the repetition of that, but also how that shifts, because there was that, it was so easy breezy for me. And then nearly the same version of that story, which was, I was terrified when she whispered into my ear that we might have to go to hospital. So just that dynamic.
Yeah. And also the stories that people, how much we kind of assimilate the experience into our identities and tell a story about it, but it's not necessarily the truth either. Yeah.
And so if we were reading this week about the kind of push-pull of different kinds of knowledges, so I think it's all fairly, it's readily understood that there's kind of an official set of knowledges, or what Conquer Good is talking about when he's talking about the map, or Diana Taylor uses the term archive. But those official kinds of knowledges, the objective, scientific, medical, the stuff that's written down, the cerebral, those kinds of knowledges, contrasted with the story knowledges, which are embodied, practiced, vulnerable. I love some of those words: homely, raw. And also you saw in that Conquer Good reading how those get associated with women's knowledges, or they're kind of, they're in Foucault's terms subjugated knowledges. Yeah, so there's a hierarchy there. That I hope, just pop in if you want to say something about this. I think that piece of it makes sense to us. Like, we get that there's the kind of book knowledge, and then there's the life knowledge, right? But what's really great about this piece is how it also illustrates the difference between what Donna Haraway is talking about with her concept of situated knowledges, and what Michel Foucault is talking about with subjugated knowledges. And these are on the slides, but can I share a couple of the slides? And I won't go on too long, but I think that there's something really, it's a great illustration of the difference between them. Yeah, are you guys okay with that?
Please, because I read it and I couldn't quite get my head around it.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to kind of think about, but I think something really fundamental happens in that kind of tension of those stories and repetition. So, okay, I'm going to try this. Just tell me if it doesn't work. So if I share, whoops, I got to actually click a button. Okay.
Yeah.
Yay. So here we are with Donna Haraway. Great reading. This is always so interesting. And I bet she's home really going, yep, I'm right. She wrote a piece called The Cyborg Manifesto about 1 million years ago in the 80s, and everything is happening that she said. But if we look at her idea of situated knowledge, this is really what was interesting to me. So we would all know that knowledge is situated, or it's contextual. Let's just say that, yeah? But what she's trying to say is that some of that knowledge, there are preferred and partial perspectives that we should pay attention to. And those are the perspectives we don't hear a lot about in official storytelling. Women's perspectives you might put in there. And what it's trying to do is make claims for better knowledge or more robust knowledge for oppressed groups. So the very kinds of groups that might not be included in official knowledges. So it's really saying that that's a kind of preferred perspective. So when I thought about the hippie character, Donna, that you brought in, I thought about how even though that might not be a kind of mainstream perspective, it is a kind of preferred perspective. There's a kind of whiff of the truth about it, or you want to think that.
Yeah.
Yeah? And then, interestingly, then, if we think about Foucault, if Haraway's got kind of positive spin on it, Foucault was really interested in looking at what dominant culture excludes or represses or erases. So all of his work was around places where those individuals might be excluded from conversation: prisons, mental health institutions, also schools, we should just say. And he's really trying to kind of play off those knowledges that get quashed or pushed down against the kind of official knowledges. So he's really looking at what we can't see, what's masked or camouflaged or indirect or hidden. Yeah. And so it was really great in that scene that kind of speeds up between you and Mary Helen, where you're trying to talk about the word natural and what that means. And does it mean no drugs, or does it mean at home, and which one's better and which one's right, and which one's preferred and which one maybe is not seen or hidden. And you did such a beautiful job playing around with those dynamics. And for me, at least, illustrated how that works and what the differences are. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense what I'm saying? How do I unshare now?
I think you can just click out.
Let's stop share. There we go. I moved to the top. Yeah. So I really liked that, both in context and then also what's privileged and what gets pushed down in the dynamic in that second section. Does anybody want to say something about that or ask a question?
Oh yeah, I had a question. I still don't quite understand the exact difference between situated and subjugated. Because is there overlap? Would I be crazy to assume there'd be overlap in those things? Like the situated knowledges in the reading, it said there's a direct link to feminist standpoint theory, but wouldn't like the place of the woman historically be a subjugated place as well as would that count as both of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. They're connected, right? They're both trying to get at the same kind of dynamics. It's really just a kind of different spin that you might put on it. So where Haraway is saying she's trying to kind of elevate or valorize those situated knowledges, women's knowledges as an example, as just as important, maybe more important, privileging them. Foucault's really trying to kind of push up against from underneath what those subjugated knowledges are. So it's maybe a dynamic. I think we need them both working together, understanding that they're situated in context, their standpoints, and that they're also pushing against whatever dominant sets of knowledges might be. And of course, that stuff changes. It's not forever written in stone, which I think Unwoman's really trying to play around with. What gets privileged. And sometimes the idea about natural gets used as both a medical thing, as a scientific thing, as a kind of full personal thing, and those things shift and change over time. That help, Con? That's a good question. Thank you.
It's a really good question.
Yeah. I think you got it. You've got it exactly. Yeah.
Doing my best.
Yeah. Yeah. Other comments? I don't want to derail our conversation about Unwoman. I just wanted to kind of get in there and say a few things. So.
Can I ask Jana a question?
Yeah.
So one thing that I find really interesting is, because I was privy to one part of the process, which was where the Rebel did a call out for people to submit their own stories for the work. But those stories ended up being read by the young person who was situated between each of the acts. I just wanted to hear more about that in terms of the process of making that decision. I guess you tapped on that with about the kind of the representation of different age groups and perspectives. But what does the retelling or because she pulled them out of a hat, didn't she?
No.
Or was it?
Interestingly, we realized pretty early that we needed, in order to present, as I said before, in order to present the theme, which was that, that women need to make their own choices about their bodies, because essentially we all have a very different experience when it comes to birth, that we needed this kind of landscape of that experience.
Yeah.
And we also realized that there was a power in it being a young woman who had all of this before them, and who sort of I felt like very powerful in that she really had this innocence of not knowing the kind of minefield she was entering into. So we put out this call for people to share their testimonials about their feelings on pregnancy and birth. And the issue that we had, to be honest, was that we had hundreds of responses. And I feel like a lot of people wanted to share their pain about it. So there was lots of responses around miscarriage, losing babies, stillbirth, not being able to get pregnant, having conditions, endometriosis, lots of stuff like that. It was very, very important to have those. But in the end, we realized we couldn't read them out randomly.
Yeah.
We had to curate a balance, because there were also beautiful stories of, I've had 4 children and they're the love of my life. One woman was like, I've had 15 kids and they're my whole world. And again, in order to we realized again, to represent this kind of multitude, rippling experience, we had to actually curate those responses. So I think every interlude had a certain number of responses, and Emma looked very carefully at having a sort of balance of good and bad. Yeah.
But it's wonderful that was so it was as curated as the 3 parts. That was sort of what's so exciting. It was a show unto itself. Those and
it was not at all random. Yeah.
No, okay. But was the idea that there was this suggestion that it could be, because
it felt random because she's picking up a card,
right? Yeah,
and from a stack that looked like
yeah.
But the top 10 cards had to be really finely selected.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the piece could have that political agenda that we didn't want it to have. Like it risks saying something like natural birth is better, or
Yeah, right.
what we really were conscious of not doing. It could not have an agenda like that. Yeah.
Great.
Can you?
But I also, I mean, I guess for people, can you see the sort of, because we'll be doing this as well in terms of when we look at your work, can you see the kind of show, don't tell aspect of that? So we're not actually like telling people the theme of the work. We're not saying, oh, this is about like everybody's got a choice. And we just had to very consciously let people come away with that by kind of showing everything. Do you see how that kind of came around? Yeah.
And the work, like tonally, like in terms of atmosphere, it's all about conjuring those ideas and like creating an imaginative space so that you can make a decision rather than like, rather than like, as you say, going, this is this, this section means this. Do you know, like that all had an ambiguity.
Yeah, you and I are really not in the business of making like issues-based theatre.
No. So and be that a warning to you all.
Yeah.
But it's in an issue terrain, let's say, or landscape. But what you're not doing is telling people what to come away with. What the kind of message, or worrying about people get your agenda, etc. Which I think is really important. Yeah.
It's like raising questions as opposed
to answering them. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a real, and again, in our kind of dialogue, Mary Helen and my dialogue, again, that was, I can't tell you how many drafts of that script that we did and improvised so the process for making that was that we worked pretty much completely on the floor, and we had our stage manager scribing everything that we said. And then Emma would go home and pull out bits that she found interesting, and we kind of cobbled them together in scenes. But like Emma, really, the director, was doing that work of going, okay, how do I balance this out? In terms of not having a point of view, and it was a very fine balance. Yeah.
Stephen, do you have any other kind of questions from a director's point of view?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on it, but I guess one question I did have was, when you had gone through the writing process, at what point in the process did sound come into the mix, especially with those intermittent beeps between each of your sections? Like, when was that decided, and how did that then affect some of the content, or did it at all?
We had like used as the source material, not in terms of content, but we liked The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
For this, there's a question, and Eliza, I will answer that because that's important. There is, and that's an interesting answer too. But so there is so we did have The Handmaid's Tale, and we liked this idea of being in another world and another reality. And there was a lot of talk and a lot of improvisation. We did physical improvisation as well, of trying to build that world and trying to understand what that world might have looked like based on The Handmaid's Tale, in this kind of weird future where what we decided on was, in this weird future, women got sterilized at 40.
Yeah.
Whether that's clear or not, that was the world we set. But again, it felt like wasting too much time on world building. So I guess that is kind of represented in images, but it's not totally clear for everyone. Lots of people thought we were waiting to get an abortion, but that was actually not the case. And then the beeps were just a way of compressing time.
Yeah. Did Emma just throw that in? Because I know Emma does the sound. Was she kind of like, I want to try this. Can we experiment? Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that we like. Yeah, it was like literally she started doing that in rehearsal and it's not like Emma will be like, and so just for this run I'm gonna put in, it's like literally all of a sudden I'm like, okay. And then you start to adapt to that, find a way to move with it. Sorry, I just want to answer, there's a couple of questions. Were you afraid that including stories that highlighted mothers discussing how amazing their kids are, or children, would highlight why abortion should be legal?
Yeah, sorry, that was written really, really terribly. But what I meant was, were you afraid that including stories that mothers were discussing how life-changing and amazing having 15 kids were, or how their 2 kids are their entire world and they love having children, would highlight the need for pro-life?
So yeah, again, that was, I felt like through the whole rehearsal process, abortion was like the elephant in the room, in terms of this is a bit of information that I think you'll find interesting, but in that you would think that as a feminist company that we would all be pro-abortion, but Mary Helen, the other actor, is Catholic and she's pro-life, and proudly so, and she has her reasons, and there was no way, again, that was something that we felt very conscious of not having an agenda on, that it had to be about people have a right to their choices and that everybody has a right to their own choices. And so again, it wasn't for or against abortion, but I do have that abortion story in the thing because it had to be addressed at some level. So that was a real issue, how do we address it, but also take into account the politics in the room. So it was very hard, and in the addressing of that, in doing that abortion story, that I think almost all that information came from the internet and just someone's story that they posted online. And I guess the message that we had with that, if you read into the subtext of that monologue, my character's talking about feeling I felt pressured into that, I made the choice, but not necessarily for myself. I made it for the partner. So in the end, the subtext was about the difficulties of making that choice, that it's not just I believe in it or I don't, that there is so many things that come into a woman's, that we don't always consider how many contextual things a woman has to take into account to make that choice. Does that make sense? It's very hard. It was hard.
When I started watching the performance, I thought it was very pro-life. I'm sorry, pro-choice.
Right.
Just in terms of I thought that they were at an abortion clinic and that both of them were having abortions, and I was like, yeah, okay, cool. But as you've started to discuss wanting to include every point of view, and it's not a performance about pro-choice, it's a performance about everything. It's a performance about the woman being able to choose whether they want an abortion or whether they want to be pro-life. I think having that context is really helpful.
Yeah, I do think in that context, it I guess if you really wanted to read into it, it has a pro-choice kind of subtext, in that the whole theme of the show is about it should be every person's choice, and that the government can't kind of make decisions for our bodies. But you know, there was like there is that essence in Mary Helen's character that was important for her to have, where she also says, where she talks about, there is one moment where she says, I had a prayer, and that was really important to her, that she was able to express through her character a little bit of her faith. Yeah. How did you incorporate that world building into the performance without explicitly referring to it?
There was a question before that.
Oh.
But
the first act, as in, Jacinta, do you mean the first act as in the pregnant women?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, just the one, I thought it was just so beautiful. It was so silent. I was just like, is there something here that I'm missing? It was like with the hair coming down, or was there something
just
that
take it in.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Stop
am I
trying to
missing
make
something?
meaning out of everything.
Yeah, there was no message really, just the pregnant body on stage. Yeah. And the hair being this like fertility sort of in this kind of fertile world. Yeah.
Okay, because I saw that as kind of like, yeah, like a symbol of like femininity, I guess, kind of like the long hair and all that, and like being tied up by it. But I was just like, oh my God, am I missing something?
No, it's, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. How did you incorporate world building into the performance without explicitly referring to it? We had to, again, it's like being very clear in ourselves about what we were there for, knowing that the audience might not interpret it in exactly that way, but as long as it kind of gave the essence of it, that it was enough. So we decided quite early on that it would help if we were tied to the chairs, just to have, so that it would be weird that we weren't getting up, and that at the end, even in sort of realizing why we weren't getting up, was that we were like stuck in this position. And then I think pretty early on, Mary Helen and I had done a sort of a physical improvisation where at some point both of us were sitting on chairs and were improvising with hair, and had all this hair coming out of our vaginas, and Kate and Emma, who were directing, just went, well, you offered it, that's it, that's the image.
Yeah.
Because we had the hair in the first act, so it was carrying that, I guess, and then the hair is in the third act as well, so it was carrying the hair through into this image of sterilization. But I can see how it got absolutely misconstrued for abortion. Yeah.
It's such a great kind of callback to Carolee Schneemann's interior scroll performance art piece too. I love that idea.
Oh yeah.
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 It's really, I love all these questions, but I just want to circle back to what Stephen and Donna are saying, which is you put things on stage to make an offer. You do that in a meaningful and robust way, and then you give it to the audience. So there might be, for anybody who makes work, an underlying thing that they're going for, but it's not an active transfer that the audience gets it or doesn't get it. And that, so Jacinta, I love what you said, because that was the meaning that you made around that performance. Like, you did get something, and what you got is what
is your own. It's your own response. That's the beauty of what the rabble do, is they open up a dream world for you to interpret. Anyway, makes me very emotional. I love their work. I do.
No, definitely. It was absolutely beautiful. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And just thank you, Donna, and thank you to the rabble for sharing that. That's not something that you could just see. And so it's really such a privilege to be able to see that performance like that. So
Yeah.
Could I ask one more question, or do you need to wrap up, Stacey?
one more question, and then yeah, we should transition so we can have some time with Dan. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, how extraordinary, and like, I guess ask about having a kind of postmenopausal body give birth for 45 minutes, and also for that person to be a woman of color, and and I know that originally it was an Irish performer, but I think that just to explain, maybe some explanation or about the process of bringing that voice into the space and how that shifted things for you as a company. I don't know, is that interesting to talk about?
I think that, so originally, for anyone who watched the last part, and I hope you all at least watched some of it, but I get that it's hard, that was originally made in Dublin with a 70-year-old actress called Olwen Fware. And she had, if you look on the Rebels website, she's quite stunning. She's got this long white hair. And she was supposed to come to Melbourne to do the work, but got a massive West End show. She's quite famous.
She's in a Harry Potter film.
Huh?
She's in a Harry Potter film.
Yeah, she's pretty big. Yeah. Anyway, she wanted to come over and do it, but she got this massive gig, couldn't do it. And I think when we found that out, knowing that Mary Helen and I, who have been with the company for so long and have this way of working, so it's really hard. So we knew that we were going to be in the show, and we already represent 2 kind of white women over 40, and we couldn't have another one. Not now, anyway. So it was a very specific choice that it had to be someone that just had, so that the piece had a kind of, again, like that represented something bigger, and that seemed quite important. And Yumi, so it's, as rather than Yumi like doing that show as if she was Olwen, her and Kate pretty much created that part from scratch all over again, so that Yumi could own it. Otherwise, I think Yumi is an incredible performer and has been working in Melbourne for a long time. And the thought of like asking such an incredible performer, an artist, to go, oh, could you just recreate what this woman did, felt really disrespectful. So as much as we knew that was going to be this labor, which is what Olwen did, the way that happened and Yumi's offering of that is entirely different to Olwen's, and it was rehearsed completely again based on, so that Yumi could own the work. Yeah. And she's amazing.
You look her up. She's an amazing burlesque performer, like incredible artist.
Yeah. And she's in her mid to late 50s. So if you had a chance and you think what kind of body can do that and that kind of fitness. And she's, I mean, that's a hard, grueling 45 minutes. And you think, oh my God. And she would literally like walk off stage and be like, so you want a glass of wine? like,
after howling.
Like, had no effect on her at all. Like she's incredible. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. It was a fun conversation. Thanks to everybody for chiming in. If you do have questions that you didn't type in or get to ask, please, send those through. You can post them on our Facebook page or send them along in an email, and so we can keep the conversation going a little bit. All right, so we want to transition now and give some space for Dan. We can meet Dan and talk about design, and we will spend from now till around 11ish doing that, and then there'll be a little bit of a break between then and when you'll turn up for either the directing dramaturgy Zoom with Stephen or the acting Zoom with Donna. So is that good for everybody? Does anybody have an issue? All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Dan. I'm gonna quickly turn off